with Tom or Tom. How's it going?
Well, Tony, it's going great. We had just wrapped up our second interview session of the second week of spring practice, heading into the first scrimmage of spring practice, and it's like, okay, we're starting to get, we're at like the end of the beginning of spring practice now. So we're getting close to the point where people can no longer tell us, well, it's early, it's too soon to say.
Yeah, there's a threshold at some point. I think, then it becomes, well, we've only had one scrimmage, and that's Saturday. But we did get to talk to the offensive line and the defensive line today. I think 6 players on each side. There were a couple of players we were expecting, like Matt Jones didn't make it. Jaden McKenzie, I don't think made it. At least I didn't see either of them.
I didn't see either of them.
No concerns, don't worry there. But talked to both Larry Johnson and
Justin Fry.
Mm-hmm. I was mostly with the offensive line. You were there with Larry Johnson, but I'll just say the person I was most impressed with today, and it's just based on, we didn't watch any practice. Mm-hmm. This is just based on the way they talk and the way they answer and just the way they carry themselves, was Carson Hinsman, who is working as the number 1 center, redshirt freshman, who I had completely mistakenly thought he was an early enrollee last year. He's only been here like 9 months. And reminds me very much of Luke Whippler in that you're a redshirt freshman, you probably shouldn't be starting or battling for a starting job, but remember after the 2020 national championship game against Alabama, as a true freshman, Luke Whippler was back home recording himself snapping and wanting critiques, and he was back here in the Woody, like as a true freshman, getting ready to battle for a starting job as a redshirt freshman, where nobody really thought he had a chance because of all of the people in front of him. But injuries and other things like that allowed him to elevate himself, and also his work allowed him to elevate himself. And so Carson Hinsman has been a center since I think he said, somebody asked him, when did you first snap? And he's like, well, it was a Thursday of like the second week of camp, before the first scrimmage. They're like, okay, you're going to move to center. And because like Jacob James was out, you're going to be the number 2 center. And then by the time the scrimmage came, he's like, okay, Justin Fry called him and said, okay, you're starting. And, he had been a center for all of, 2 days at that point. And said the first snap went way over Kyle McCord's head. So I believe he has progressed since then.
Yes.
And things are looking much better for Ohio State and for Carson Hinsman on that front. Just really impressed with him. His demeanor, his mentality really reminded me of Luke Whippler.
Yeah, and maybe it's something about centers, because Luke Whippler was like that. Harry Miller was like that, where he showed up late and was still in the mix very early. And I think he started as a sophomore. Now or his second year. I think that was his guard, but still he's, was right in that mix immediately. And Hinsman is someone who, when we were going through and looking at the depth chart for the spring, he was kind of like, he was probably somewhere on that list, maybe.
He's one of those 8 guards.
Yeah, one of the guys who was maybe a guard, but maybe not. And, the center was going to be Jacob James, but he's out for the spring. Or it was going to be Vic Cutler, who they brought in as a transfer, so they're expecting Vic Cutler to potentially be able to compete for playing time. And then here we are, the first full week of pads with the centers, with the offensive line, and boom, Carson Hinsman is in line to potentially start. And he was someone who Justin Fry talked about last year, coming in, and you don't expect a true freshman to really flash. But he said Hinsman and Tager Shabola both kind of had moments last year where you kind of went, okay, it's not here yet, but there is something there.
Yeah, I liked how he said, like, there were a couple times with Carson Hinsman, he'd do something and Fry would be like, who's that? Oh, okay, it's Carson Hinsman. And I did talk to Tager Shabola. He got his black stripe off today. George Fitzpatrick got his black stripe off today. So those 2 redshirt freshmen carried over from last year. Asked Tager about it. He said it's a long time coming, but obviously he expected it to come off sooner than it did. But he said having that doesn't mean he wasn't contributing to the team, because last year he was like the number 2 left guard. He played in 4 games last year. He was a valuable member of the depth chart. And so now to get that black stripe off, I think we all expected it this spring, battling for a starting job at right tackle with Zen Michalski, who we also talked to, and Zen Michalski moving from left tackle to right tackle this year. So this is the first time he's ever played right tackle. And as we have heard from other people, it's a completely different position. Right tackle
Yeah.
to left tackle is the biggest jump of any of the offensive line positions, basically.
What was so interesting to me was listening to Josh Fryer talk about flipping sides of the line, because Josh Fryer played on the right side a lot last year, and Zen Mahalski talking about flipping sides of the line because he went from the left. He was kind of the second or third string left tackle last year, and he's kind of mostly worked at left tackle before. And Mahalski talked about the challenges and all that kind of stuff, and Fryer kind of went, yeah, no, he's different hand, whatever. And he said, and someone asked him about Zen Mahalski's answer there, and he said, well, you got to remember, Zen came to football late. Josh Fryer's been playing football a lot longer than Zen Mahalski has. Zen Mahalski, I think, started in his junior year of high school, sophomore or junior year of high school. He really had not played much football before then. And so he said, you got to remember, this is the first time Zen's had to switch positions. Josh Fryer said, I've had to switch positions 5-6 times. So it's like, what's one more time? Mm-hmm. He's had to sort of adapt and be, mentally flexible enough. And he said, there's different responsibilities on the left side. And he talked about, the added pressure of being the guy protecting the blind side of the quarterback. But still, it's just kind of like, well, if you're doing the right tackle versus left tackle stuff, you're basically doing the same stuff. You're just, everything's backwards. Mm-hmm. So, it sounds like one of those things where, if I tried to eat, I'm a lefty, so if I tried to eat with my right hand, it would probably look real weird and clunky for a while. But if I sat there and worked at it for a few months, I would probably stop getting food on my face eventually, maybe. It's just a matter of, okay, undo that muscle memory that you have and just reverse everything. And that's just reps, it sounds like.
As Yoda once said, first you must unlearn what you have learned, and then go forth.
See, I haven't watched any of it. May the Fourth be with you. Is that what it? Was that what the same thing? See, I haven't learned very much Star Wars, so I don't have very much to unlearn. So therefore, I'm way ahead of you.
No, that's in fact the opposite. Talking to the, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I have seen a bunch of questions come through on our live feed. Keep putting those in there. We will go through and answer a bunch of those later. We're just kind of running through because these are all very, these are always kind of, loosely structured, and there's 3 of us and there's 4 tables. We're kind of bouncing back and forth to different tables and listening to different people talk at different times. So we, as opposed to our normally very tightly structured, basically, like the Japanese gardens where every rake line is perfect. That's our normal show structure. This one is going to be a little more freewheeling than that.
Yeah, a little willy-nilly. Larry Johnson, and the topic of the day, because we talked to Jack Sawyer. Mm-hmm. So imagine what we're talking about, the move away from Jack and then also just to be full-time defensive end. And it is obviously something that Larry Johnson pushed for, and so he's happy with that. Jack Sawyer trying to play it off like, it is what it is. I'll do whatever. But he did say he'd be lying if he was happy with how he played last year. And so he's one of the guys that I'm expecting bigger things from. And he did lead the team, tied for the team lead in sacks with 4.5 last year. But I don't think that would satisfy him this year. But he seems happy to be doing what he's doing. And Larry Johnson seems to be very happy that he can now just let Jack Sawyer put his hand in the dirt and go get the quarterback.
Yeah, and that's, this is potentially a very big year for Jack Sawyer and a big year for JT Tuimoloau as well on the other side of the line, because while, number one, it really does feel like they just got here. Number two, this is potentially their last year as Buckeyes. They could be, on Wednesday this week, we watched Zach Harrison running through all the pro day drills. A year from now, that could be JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer and Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams. All of those guys are potentially draft eligible after this season. So, this is a big year for all of them. And, for in a different way, maybe with all 4 of them, including Jack Sawyer, you've seen the flashes, but they haven't necessarily put it all together yet. Tyleik Williams hasn't been on the field as much, and it sounds like that's kind of a conditioning thing and just a consistency thing. Mike Hall had injury stuff that kept him off the field last year, but was super impressive when you saw him. JT Tuimoloau had the absolute blow-up game against Penn State, but the total numbers weren't overwhelming last year. And then Jack Sawyer, this is a big year for all 4 of those guys. And we have seen a lot of times in the past that third year is when the light really comes on, where, as a freshman, you're maybe playing a little bit here and there in sort of a situational role. As a sophomore, that role gets a little bigger. And then junior, now these guys are they're not quite the old heads in the room, but like JT Tuimoloau was talking about the fact that he's he is the veteran voice in there in a lot of ways right now, which, again, it was only like less than 20. I mean, he was, what, July 4th, give or take, in 2021. So we're talking like 20 months ago, something like that he was, the recruit, and now 20 months later, here he is, the veteran voice in the defensive line room.
Yeah, and Jack Sawyer did say, like, there is this feeling back to where the expectations that everybody had for those two, they feel like that's coming this year, now that they can just focus on doing that. And I think with those four, all in that same class, all the expectations that people had for them, you expect, the expectations are always too high. And you expect them to hit right away, and then as sophomores, boom. But I think it's okay to expect a lot from them this year, and I think everybody will.
Yeah, and JT Tuimoloau talked about him and Jack Sawyer just together. I think they have. You mentioned a couple of years ago the expectations might have been a little high. It sounds like this year their expectations for themselves are very high. Where, true freshmen, you don't play that much, and it's always so tempting to say, well, but in this case he's a 5-star, so therefore the previous rules don't apply, and it just doesn't. The rules always sort of seem to apply because you just need to be a certain size, a certain strength, a certain quickness to play the Big Ten, and then you have to get the technique refined, and it just takes some time.
Yeah. Do we want to get to some questions? Are you through rambling, or?
Never.
So we can ramble through questions.
We can.
As well.
I'm going to work our way backwards. Sue wants to know, what happened to Ronnie Hickman yesterday? Did we get an answer on that?
No. No idea on why he chose not to work out, and you have to assume or hope it was an injury type of thing, because this is the best opportunity for you to impress people and impress the NFL. So I don't know, maybe he'll do some personal workouts, or will there be another pro day because Ohio State will sometimes do a second pro day, not really open for the media, but for some NFL teams.
And a lot of teams will do individual workouts as well, so maybe you're looking at something like that. Gary says, glad to hear some of the youngsters stepping up on the offensive line. Need to have some depth this year, especially at offensive tackle. Right now, I don't know, who do you feel is the backup left tackle right now? Because it feels like right tackle, there's a pretty clear answer where Tager Shabola and Zen Mahalski are the top two at right tackle. Probably not in that order. But at left tackle, who's behind Josh Fryer at left tackle?
I'm going to assume George Fitzpatrick, but I think that was the case the first practice we saw in terms of how they were repping.
Yeah.
So that's who I would have there now. We'll see on Saturday whether that's the case, and we'll see on Tuesday whether that stayed the case.
Yeah. So that'll be something we'll probably know more about, be able to give you a better answer about in the coming days. Well, someone from our company account says, what's for lunch? I'm going to guess that's the person who's sitting about 15 feet from us.
You can tell how some people are just like waiting to go to lunch. That's Kevin over there just watching, like, just wrap it up. It's like, we're 12 minutes in, wrap it up.
13 minutes in.
13, wrap it up.
Working overtime. Steven wants to know, will Larry Johnson shorten his rotations? And it feels like the answer there is he's almost going to have to, because you don't have. Yeah, right. I mean, you've got, you have JT Tuimoloau, you have Jack Sawyer. Those are your starting defensive ends. Caden Curry's 3. And then after that, Kenyatta Jackson, Amari Abor. You never, we are still very early in the spring, and you don't want to get too far down the reading tea leaves thing, but we didn't get a chance to talk to Kenyatta Jackson. We didn't get a chance to talk to Amari Abor. Sometimes that's an indication that there's just a certain number of guys they can bring out. Sometimes that's an indication that these guys have class and they have to leave. And sometimes that's an indication that you're not talking to guys because they're not close enough to be being ready to play. So you can interpret that however you want to, but to me it feels like there's a top 3, and then again, let's see. Maybe one of those guys really shines during that scrimmage on Saturday, and then we're having a whole different conversation next week.
Well, and remember, one of those spots is going to probably be Mitchell Melton playing the jack position. So they may only need, honestly, 3 full-time defensive ends for their usual rotation. They're, when the game is still on the line kind of rotation before they get into 5 and 6 at defensive end, because I think they can maybe get by with a 3.5 for a while, but Larry Johnson doesn't want to. And then defensive tackle, I asked Ty Hamilton, so are you still at nose tackle? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, who's there with you? He's like, well, we rotate all the guys. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Mike, sometimes it's Ty League, sometimes it's Hero. It's like, yes, that's exactly what I figured.
That is both a true answer and also probably a little bit of an obfuscation of who is exactly there.
Yeah.
Like, who's on this podcast? Well, lots of people have been on this podcast before. I mean, Kevin's been on it, and Mark's been on it, I'm sure. I mean, but lots of people. Well, but who'd you say the topic? Well, it's still early. We're only 800 episodes in. I don't know. It's very early.
Let's get through the first scrimmage.
It feels like the interior there is going to be. I mean, you can kind of pencil in Mike Hall, Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams.
That's what Larry Johnson said.
It's kind of you got three. It's kind of the interior is kind of similar to the outside where you've got your three. Hero Kanu was out for interviews, but he was sitting there and watching interviews. And I always find that so interesting because it's just the younger guys. Kenyatta Jackson did this too. He was
sitting there. They both did that last year too.
Yeah, they will sit there and they'll watch these other guys do interviews, and it's kind of, it always feels like it's a little bit like mental reps. Like when they talk about mental reps during practice, that you're not out there practicing, but you're watching, and you're sort of going in through in your head. Okay, if I was out there, how would I do this? And Hero Kanu, like Kenyatta Jackson did one or two. Hero Kanu just kind of went all the way down the line, and just whichever defensive lineman was talking, he would sit there and listen to Ty Hamilton or Larry Johnson.
He was eventually down there with Carson Hinsman as he got down the line.
Yeah. So I would say he's, not based on the interviews necessarily, but he's someone who feels like he's, the second year guy. He's had a year to kind of get stronger, get, improve technique, all that kind of stuff. He feels like someone who's maybe in that mix. We know they have had a nose tackle or I don't remember which one, a defensive tackle of some flavor, visiting as a potential transfer earlier this week. So, are they looking for a little depth in the portal? That's a possibility as well. So just something to kind of keep an eye on. Again, it's getting later, but it's not quite as early. Peace Clan wants to know, is there any indication that Jaden Ballard would get any push with speed like that? I can't imagine they aren't going to use it.
Well, they used to have a guy here named Jamison Williams, who they used a lot in terms of clearing out the defense so that the underneath would be available for everybody else. And I still feel like he was obviously underutilized, but you're throwing to Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave, so you can't get mad at anybody for that.
It's like the old Jim Tressel, why are you not throwing to the tight end more? Well, every time I throw to the tight end, I'm not throwing to Ted Ginn or Santonio Holmes. So no disrespect to the tight end.
Exactly, yeah. So this is a valid argument, but we talked about it after yesterday's show for the morning show. Just watching them run Jaden Ballard, send him deep, send him deep. And he'd have to come back and they're like, okay, we're going deep again. And you know what? I would like to see him be used as much during the season as he was on Pro Day because, clearly he's got wheels and it's, I think, about everything else. But this is a big spring for him. No Julian Fleming there at that Z position. And so, I think he said it's him and it's Keon Grays playing the Z right now. So he should be getting all of the work that he needs and then doing something with it.
Right. This is not a guarantee. This is an opportunity. And an opportunity means you have a chance. It doesn't mean you're locked in to do this. It just means you have a chance to show the coaches that you can do all the stuff. And running real fast in a straight line and catching a football is great. That's not the entirety of the job description. That's one of those, you're applying for a job and it's like, required skills, run fast in a straight line and catch a football. But, also under required skills is blocking, running other routes. Because if you only run one route, and we're obviously oversimplifying, but you can't just run the 9 and then the deep post and
unless you're Devin Smith.
Yeah, well, and he's from the same high school as Devin Smith, where has worn the same number as Devin Smith, I believe, in high school. And so if you were going to comp someone to someone, that would be the person you would comp them to, sort of naturally. But you haven't seen the Devin Smith production yet at the college level.
Is Ohio State undefeated when Jaden Ballard scores a touchdown?
Has he scored more than one touchdown? I know he scored the one against Toledo last year.
Did they win that one?
They did by about 1 trillion points. So they win and they cover and they hit the over.
Well, I think
all by themselves. Yes, it's more important this year than it was last year, as it turns out. Sue wanted to know about Luke Montgomery, as we were sort of talking about some of these young guys potentially being on the field. Is he going to be someone who's going to get on the field and earn a spot this year? offensive line, boy, that is such a hard place to get on the field as a true freshman. It happens. And, we did our black stripe draft earlier this week, and he was the one offensive lineman who got picked, kind of middle of the pack.
Yep.
And everyone else was maybe a little further back. So if a true freshman offensive lineman is going to do it this year, I would say he's the most likely. But, this is going to sound like I'm being a hater, and this is just sort of me running the odds in my head. It is always smart to bet against an offensive lineman playing any kind of meaningful minutes as a true freshman. Fourth quarter against Youngstown State, and it's 66-3. Absolutely, you'll see him out there because that'll be one of the 4 games that a bunch of those guys get. But is he going to be out there? Is he the guy who's wearing number 41 in the Buffalo package this year? My guess based on current alignment would be Enoch Mahi, but who knows? There's a long way to go between now and then.
Yeah, and you can be in the 2 deep and still not play much. Nicholas Petit Frere was a backup as a true freshman and still redshirted. Taker Cibola was a backup as a true freshman, still redshirted, but you get to play. I wonder how many games Paris Johnson played as a true freshman on the offensive line. Probably maybe.
That was the weird 2020 season, but he was in there in at least one of the playoff games, maybe both, because they had guards go down in those games. So,
he definitely played, but you don't play a lot, and so you can have a good freshman year as an offensive lineman and be almost unnoticed.
Yeah. Sue wants to know who's the number 2 tight end. Is it Joe Royer or G. Scott? And it sounds like the answer is yes. One or both of them. They are both in the rotation. And that was something, if you go back and listen to one of the morning shows this week, I think it was the one with Ryan Day. So that would have been on Tuesday morning, I think.
Last Monday night.
Or Wednesday morning / Tuesday night. He said with great confidence in his voice. You'll hear Ryan Day talk about all the stuff they're looking for with those tight ends, and can you play as the only tight end and block the defensive end? Can you play off the line and be the Jeremy Ruckert type of tight end? There's all sorts of stuff. You got to be able to do all of it. And, they're in the process this spring of working through getting everyone comfortable, because it feels like they've got one tight end. It's like, yes, absolutely, Cade Stover. And then you sort of get the question, the tone of your voice rises a little as it gets a little more of an implied question mark at the end, because it's going to be Joe Royer or G. Scott, almost certainly.
Yeah, and until one of those guys shows that they can do everything, just imagine Cade Stover is back on the farm for a while. And one of these guys has to do all of that. And until you can, then you're just, okay, you are a spot guy. We'll use you in this role. We'll use you in this role. Whatever you're best at, that's what we'll find for you. But you're not necessarily going to be out there at all times, like when, like it used to be with Ruckert and Luke Farrell, like those 2 guys. Or even Mitch Rossi, in the role that they had for him out there, he played a lot. And so you got to, I guess, if you're not able to do all of those things, you better make yourself really useful like Mitch Rossi did, because they never really viewed him as that second inline tight end or the flex tight end by any means. But he was out there a lot, and he had a home.
I do like the idea of Cade Stover having to go back to the farm like it's Little House on the Prairie days. Like the kids just get the couple weeks off in the fall because it's harvest time. So Cade Stover has to go back and, I guess they do beef, so I don't know if it's you don't really harvest the beef.
Yeah,
but anyway, I don't think that's going to be how the things play out this fall. But again, it's early. You never know. Dave wants to know, if Ryan Day goes somewhere in the next year or two, who are the top replacements? To me, I think the first call is going to Luke Fickle.
Is there a second call?
I sure don't think so. I think he's going to pick up. I think he's probably got Gene Smith's number, and he's probably not sending him to voicemail. So I don't think you're going to go much past that. I know people want it to be Mike Vrabel, and we saw Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel was here just yesterday for Pro Day, wearing a very puffy white vest. But I think the smart money is on the guy who has been doing the college thing, who has, taken a program from Tommy Tuberville, Cincinnati, to the college football playoff, and then been good enough that they got bumped up from one level of from a group of 5 to a Power 5 conference, and is now running a Big Ten team, and is probably getting a little bit of the Big Ten. All the NIL things that you have to deal with at a higher level. He's probably getting some on-the-job training there. I think that's probably the first call, and I don't think there's probably a second call.
No, and I wonder how long does Luke Fickell, how long do his people wait for Ohio State to call before they call? You know, if it goes a day, who calls first? Who blinks first? Because obviously he's a very proud guy. But do you think he would call before Ohio State called him?
I mean, I don't think it would take that long. If Ryan Day left to go coach the New England Patriots tomorrow,
you don't think Gene Smith's going to take a couple days just to?
Yeah, I don't think this is like Swingers where he's like, you gotta wait a day and wait 2 days and then a day before you call the beautiful babies. Like, no, he's just going to pick up the phone and call Wisconsin. It's
definitely not like Swingers.
the
movie,
the,
yes,
the 90s
yes.
movie, yes. What, like I'm supposed to be all excited because Luke Fickell's wearing a backpack? Come on. Christian Person wants to know, is the scrimmage going to be recorded? No. There are no cameras we will get to watch. We will not get to shoot photos. We're not get to shoot video.
We were even told we cannot even have sound. Cannot record the actual audio of the scrimmage.
Christian wants to know,
there will be drawings.
What about the true freshman tight end, the Jelani Thurman? Let us watch him go through some blocking drills, and then we'll tell you how close he is to being on the field.
As we've said before, he was listed at 6'5", 6'6", 225, but came in at like 253. So he looks legitimate, but I mean, we'll see.
Just scrolling through questions here to make sure we didn't miss anything. Sue says chicken shish kebabs for lunch, which is an excellent choice.
Oh, really? You know what? So basically, boneless wings on a stick. That's what you're talking about.
You can have chicken. You don't. There are parts of the chicken other than the wings. They're just not called wings. Not calling.
So it's the
chicken wing kebabs. It's the lies. I think that's the thing that is most galling to me. It's the lies. Just scrolling through here. So Dave wants to know, boy, Dave is in an optimistic place. What happens to the 24 recruiting class if Ryan Day loses to Michigan again this year? I don't know I don't know how much that changes anything. You're coming to Ohio State to play at Ohio State. You're coming to Ohio State to play in the college football playoff and play for a national championship. We saw last year that a loss to Michigan did not inhibit that in any way. You're coming to Ohio State to get developed and play in the NFL, and the draft results continue to sort of bear that out over time. So I don't know that makes that big of a difference. You have seen Michigan get into Ohio a little bit more. They had Jordan Marshall, the running back out of the Cincinnati area, committed to Michigan this week. That's the first time in 10 years or something that Michigan has gotten a like contested recruit out of the state of Ohio.
No.
And there was an offensive lineman from Ohio who committed to Michigan and talked about Ohio State in his commitment this week, but didn't actually have an offer from Ohio State. So that's kind of an important piece of that conversation that maybe didn't translate to what got actually.
Yeah, I mean the 24 class is going to be what it is, and if you leave because of the reason of that game, then I don't know that you were really ever locked in.
And I think people overestimate quite a bit the result of a single game. The 2014 Virginia Tech game was one of the best recruiting weekends Ohio State had in the decade of the 2010s. Like there's a picture that Mark Pantoni will tweet out every once in a while it's like Joey Bosa and Ezekiel Elliott and Eli Apple and someone else. I think there were 4 of those guys on the field, and they were all there for the Virginia Tech game. And this team loses to a 6-6 Virginia Tech team, and it's like, oh boy, this is a disaster. And then they all
2012.
Oh, 2012 game. Okay. Well, they didn't lose any games that year, so never mind. Cool story though. Anyway, so
that's the only reason I brought that up, because you were way wrong.
No, there is.
But no, that is.
But generally, picture. Yes, that is an
4
iconic.
First rounders.
Yes, yeah. And then there was. Well, there've been a bunch of games where they've had guys in for losses. Ohio State has lost a bunch of those high-profile non-conference games. They've lost to Michigan last year. That was a pretty big recruiting weekend.
Weekends.
And
but who did they lose after the loss last year, who did they lose to? Michigan.
Right. Yeah.
So, like, just looking past results, who have they lost because of a loss? And it's it's not a long list of players.
No. I think someone, Sage Ohio, I think, was the one who wanted to know, would Ohio State hire an ex-coach and basically do the Grover Cleveland route? And I think the story of how that ex-coach is an ex-coach, that was not he had a 4-year run at Ohio State and failed. That was oh crap, it's Memorial Day and we need a coach, and the season starts in a couple months, and also we're going to be missing a bunch of our good players. Like, that was not a coach that failed at Ohio State. That was a coach that was put in an impossible position at Ohio State. So I think that kind of changes how that conversation around him is framed.
Yeah, no, I don't even, when you said ex-coach, I'm thinking of the other ex-coaches. Like, he doesn't, that portion of his career, I mean, when you talk about Ohio State and their success in hiring head coaches, a Hall of Famer every time since 1950, like, you can now start to put Luke Fickell in there, because before you'd be like, well, and then of course Luke Fickell for a year, that doesn't really count. Now it kind of counts because he's done so well, and it's like even the 1 year where it's like, we're just going to throw this guy in there.
It's funny how the conversation around him has changed, because I know they were very careful to not call him an interim coach when they brought him in, and then as soon as they finished 6 and 7, it's kind of viewed as this interim year. And then now it's like, well, I mean, he was in an unfair position, but he was the regular coach. It's just, the conversation around that has changed so much over the last decade, as his stock has risen quite a bit over the last decade as well. Just checking one more time if we have anyone else. Christian says Day is a good coach, just has to give up play calling. He's certainly on the way to doing that. That's
we'll get a look at how good this Brian Hartline guy is at play calling on Saturday.
Let's see. Day really not big on Ryan Day. Tony Gerdeman's burner account says, how does Tony handle being the face of the Buckeye Huddle franchise, and why isn't Tony's expertise from winning many NCAA titles and the NCAA video games being used in the show more often? How are you typing without?
He's right over there.
Yeah. Gary K wants more Huddle Eats, more of Tony eating grown-up food without ketchup. And we got you to eat baby octopus last year. That was, I don't know if we're going to top that one. That was pretty good.
It was not very good, actually.
It was.
I don't think anybody liked it.
Oh, it was fine. Let's see. Yeah, and there's a lot of conversation about the running backs in the Peace Clan. I'll bring it up. Are the wheels coming off after missing Marshall? People sounds like he's on board, but missing that one is
well, let's see what happens this spring with James Peoples.
Yeah, James Peoples, who is, and this is just a statement of fact. This is not a judgment. This is not a rationalization. Who is ranked higher than Jordan Marshall, substantially higher than Jordan Marshall. Like, I get that you don't want to lose an in-state player, but the objective national recruiting rankings say that James Peoples is ranked higher than Jordan Marshall. So, and it's not like one is substantially bigger. I think they're half an inch off in height and 2 pounds off in weight or something like that. So it's not like, well, yes, but he's a very different type of back. Like, no, it's the same type of back, and one of them is ranked higher than the other. And I understand that they don't lose in-state players to Michigan. But if you're getting a guy who's higher ranked, it's like, they have had who was the tackle that they lost, and then they ended up with Nick Petit-Frere. Where Nick Petit-Frere.
Jackson Carman.
Well, Jackson Carman, that's right. An in-state tackle, lost to Clemson, and then they had to settle for Nick Petit-Frere, who turned out to be probably a better college player than Jackson Carman.
I will say, whoever you get committed in this class at running back, you better keep them. And,
yes.
Whatever. And this is now, whoever commits to Ohio State is going to have them. I want my NIL money, because you don't want to. You can't afford to lose somebody. Like, you can't strike out 2 classes in a row.
This is also,
I know they want to take 2.
Yeah,
but,
and Sam Williams-Dixon, who was from Holmes County and is now at Pickerington, which is devastating to me in terms of a last Buckeye from certain counties, because he was going to be the first Buckeye ever from Holmes County, which is like Amish country, and now he's at Pickerington, where they take like 4 kids every year. So that's less exciting. But anyway, whoever those running backs are this year, they have a very unique path to the field, because there's no one a class ahead of you. So you are immediately, you're going to have some combination of Mayan Williams, Travion Henderson, Xavier Johnson, if you want to include him, Chip
Dallin
Trainum, who, all of those guys are potentially done after the season. They could be done after the season. Dallin Hayden could be done after next season. Like, there's potentially a wide open path to the playing field there. And for you to be able to come in with that kind of a path to the playing field, and also at a program at the level of Ohio State, that's pretty uncommon. That where, it didn't work out great for them last year, but it could really be a strong selling point this cycle.
Mm-hmm. Are we done? Did we read everybody?
I think we've gone through pretty much everything other than Kevin, which I put him in timeout on the. I don't know if you can even put your own account on timeout, but
He's
thank you. Number one. He says 1 minute to go, so I guess we better wrap it up.
Better stretch this out and wrap it up. Okay. I want to thank you all for joining us. As always, find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Say hello to us there on the message board. Find us at YouTube.com/BuckeyeHuddle as well, like you did. Go ahead and like this video if you like it, or if you don't. Go ahead and also subscribe if you haven't. Go ahead and hit the bell to be notified whenever we go live, whenever we drop videos. And we've got some offensive and defensive line interviews. Justin Fry, Larry Johnson will be dropping here shortly if they haven't already. So thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you guys later.